Welcome back. I've had a chance to take a look at everyone's projects from the first session, and wow, you guys have done a really great job. So I wanted to use this video to give you some feedback from what I've seen so far, and also in session 2 we covered a whole lot of new information. Don't worry, we're going to use sessions 3, 4, and 5 to keep going back and reviewing, but in this video I wanted to go over how to create timers and why you want to do that. So first things first, one of the big things that I found from taking a look at your work from session 1 is that frequently you'd have a sprite, you could see him down here, but where was he here? So I want to show you why and how you can troubleshoot and how you can get them back. So let's say, for example, you're playing in your project and you might by mistake grab a sprite and you're kind of moving him around the screen. And remember we talked about the boundary for x is negative 240, negative 240, and for y it's 180 and negative 180. One of the things about Scratch is that it doesn't have a camera feature built into the player or the designer. So if you move a character outside of that 180, 240, 180, 240 perimeter, Scratch just says, oh, he's gone. Whereas in some other animation platforms, you can add a camera feature that will follow your sprite wherever you place them. Anyhow, so that's a long way of saying if you do something like this, you're playing around and all of a sudden you do this and then you drop, he's gone. So first off, I want to show you how you can tell if this has happened. So what you want to do to check your X and Y coordinates, so you've got your sprite highlighted here. You see he's not here on the screen, but if you go to the very far right of your development screen, you can see his X and Y show up here. So you can see when I was playing around in my screen, I by mistake dropped him where X is 445, which is greater than 240. So we need to get him back, assuming you want him back. So this simple script here, which I got by clicking on events, dragged this one over and then went over to motion and went down here and drug select X to 0 and Y to 0 over to make this little block. So when you click on the little green flag now, you'll see he comes back. So that's a quick and easy way to get him back. Once you've got this script working, I would just go ahead and get rid of it. You can either drag it back here, or as you've probably already found, if you break the seal of the blocks, if you break the connection of the blocks, it deactivates it. I say that you might not want to keep this because it would definitely affect your other programming when you're going later in building your story. So that's a quick fix. The other thing I wanted to go over is how we created timers. And we talked about how Scratch, when you have used this control, wait, and in this project we don't have a timer yet, and yet you'll see wait works. And you think, well, gosh, how does it know? Well, Scratch has its own timer in the system, and you can see what it looks like by clicking on Sensing. And you see this little timer down here? If you check the box, you see it appears. But you also see, gosh, what is it doing? A, it didn't really start at 0, and B, it is counting by the 10th of a second, and it is really fast. And you'll also see that while you can reset it, there's a little block here, and if we drag it up here, you can make it start again. There you go. But you can't make it stop. There's no stop command. See, even if I click the stop button, the reason for that is just what drives Scratch. It's kind of Scratch's brain, and you don't really control that, and Scratch doesn't let you do that. So that's pretty limiting. You can't really use it for your games very well. Even seeing time move this fast is not very helpful either in your game. So I wanted to explain that there is a timer, but we really don't want to use that for our programming. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck it. And what we talked about in the second session is how to create variables. And time would be considered a variable because you're going to build certain sets of animation to control resetting the timer, making the timer start counting, and telling the timer when to stop. So this is my favorite event handler, as you know. So we're going to keep sticking with that because that looks familiar. We're going to go first though to data. And we're going to click on make a variable. And we're going to call it timer. And for a single player game, generally you're going to want to stick with for all sprites. Next week I'll make a video about score, which we also talked a little bit about session 2. And then when you are creating score, you frequently, if you're making a 2-player game, you'll want it to be for a specific sprite. But anyhow, we're going to stay for timer for all sprites and click OK. Then you see you get a whole bunch of other choices here, and timer is automatically checked, and then you see your timer shows up here, which you can move around the screen. And you can also do something like if you double click it, you'll just get the time. So it kind of depends on what you want to see. So to get it to start, when your game starts, to reset that is, we're going to say, and I would recommend this to people when they add these, is automatically, when green flag is checked, set timer to 0. Okay, so let's say that we want to get our timer going. So we're going to go back to get another green flag, and we're going to go to control, and we want it forever to count, right? And then we're going to grab a wait 1 second because you want the clock to go up by 1 second, right? And then we're going to go back to the data, and you see from the choices that you got when you made the variable, we have a change timer by 1. There we go. So let's test it out. I'm going to click on the green flag, and sure enough, my timer starts counting. But it'll keep going forever. You can stop it though by clicking on the stop button. And that's the difference between making your own timer and the timer that we just saw that Scratch has inside itself. So the last part that you want to build is how to make your timer stop. So let's go back to events. When green flag is clicked, excuse me. Then we're going to do a new control that we haven't used before, which is wait until. So we're going to grab wait until. And the next thing we're going to do is go to the operator. So we're going to put an operator in the middle of a variable, which sounds complicated but isn't too bad once you get the hang of it. So we're going to grab something equals something. In this case, we want to say in real English, when the time equals, in this case, we're going to say 10, just so you can see it in action. But you can change that value, that numeric value, to any value you want. Mostly in a game, you're going to give yourself, what, 30 to 60 seconds. But you don't want to wait 30 seconds or 60 seconds to see if it worked when you're first building it. So we have x, we're going to put time equals 10. So to get that time back, we want to go back to data. And we're going to grab, and it's funny, you may not even realize this, but you can grab this little guy and drag him in to define which box you're talking, which part of your programming you're talking about, so Scratch understands. And then you can just type your time. If you click in the box, go to your keyboard. Okay, so Scratch says, okay, time equals 10, now what? So the last part is you have to tell it to stop, and that's in control 2. That's another block we hadn't gotten to until this week. So we have wait until and stop all. And that's not just going to stop the timer, but it's going to stop everything that's going on in your screen. In this example, we don't have these guys going yet, so let's give them a quick little animated bit so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to add a glide to Krabby here. And you guys are pretty familiar with this glide feature. This has been a pretty popular motion to add to your animation. And I'm going to do a little random. You know, we had used that operator before. We used the operator in time, so the green area shouldn't look too unfamiliar to you. And you know, with X, since we know the range is 240, we're going to do positive 240 and negative 240. So he just kind of goes around the screen. And then we also know that for Y, the boundary is 180 and negative 180. So we'll type in 180 and negative 180. So this is going to give our crab some motion, and then we're going to hopefully, for what we just programmed over here, When the timer equals 10, he'll stop. So let's see if that's going to work. So we got our timer going. We have Krabby moving. So we have time is 10 and Krabby stopped moving. So that's a simple way to explain timers. Next week we'll get more into talking about scores and we'll actually get to working to building your applications. So in the meantime, keep scratching.